civil industry people are thugs. I know it's very wrong to say that, but that's the reality. Thus, a need of united body of people who would truly represent the interests of our industry was felt. American Society of Civil Engineers is the world's largest and oldest society of civil engineers. The society, with its headquarters at Princeton, Virginia, USA, has more than 150,000 members worldwide and is celebrating its 170th anniversary in 2023. The main focus of ASC is to contribute to the improvement of the image of civil engineers and make their contribution to society more effective. There are not many things about ASC, but I will just summarize a few of them. That ASC, one of the main benchmark contribution to the society is its monthly journal, which are referred by many students and up to PhD level students and even practitioner engineers. The society also organizes many conferences, seminars, training programs every year. These events bring the ideal platform for bridging the gap between latest technology and practical implementation. ASCE also has its own code and standard, which are used in many projects in USA and also in many countries worldwide. AAC is regularly consulted by US President on various issues related to civil engineers. AAC has its presence all over the world through its sections and groups. And in India, we have AAC India section with its head office at Calcutta. And then India section is further divided into 4 regions: Eastern, Western, Eastern region, Western region, Northern region, and Southern regions. All regions and India section work together as one body to enhance the aim of AAC, that is to improve the image of civil engineers and to make its contribution to the society more effective. I can go on talking about AAC, but I will not take much time. I know we all are eagerly waiting to listen to our expert, Dr. Sarma. I, as a president of AAC, formally welcome you all, including Dr. Sarma, on the topic of immense importance of practicing for the practicing engineers, designers, field engineers, and also to new and future engineers. I, Engineer Ravindra Ringsia, President of AACIS, on behalf of KDK College of Engineering, Nagpur, ICI Nagpur Center, ACC Cement, and ACE, formally welcome you all once again for this topic of aim and planning of in-situ testing in concrete structures. Certainly, this expert topic would greatly benefit to the faculties, students, and even professionals and field engineers, including quality control in charge. I am extremely happy and delighted to see the kind of talk being conducted by very expert academicians and professionals for the benefit of entire civil engineering fraternity. This has been proved by the overwhelming response from across pan-India and even from abroad. I have seen in past e-talks more than 1,000 participants have been participated in each talk, and then today also, as been pointed out by Dr. Varghese, that more than 2,500 participants has been registered. There's a huge number. I would like to introduce our expert, Dr. Umesh Sarma. Dr. Sarma is a professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. He has a wide area of interest, which includes structural fire engineering, concrete at elevated temperatures, durability and service life of reinforced concrete, influence of corrosion on structure performance, repair and restore, retrofitting of structures, testing of concrete in structures, repair and material characterization. Well, even one of my interests is repair and retrofitting of structures, and which I do mainly in Mumbai. Dr. Sharma also has many international collaborations, such as fire performance of ACE RCC structure from Canada, smart FRPs for sustainable infrastructure Toronto, fire resistance of concrete fill steel column Auckland, performance of structure under post-earthquake fire UK, natural fiber reinforced cementitious composite for sustainable infrastructure Austria. He has supervised 14 PhD scholars and has published more than 150 papers in peer review journals and conferences. Dr. Sharma has been awarded following awards, which includes Young Researchers Award of Excellency from Changsha, China, and Outstanding Concrete Technologist of Uttarakhand from ICI. He has many professional membership and is a very active member of Indian Concrete Institute. I once again welcome you all to this 15E expert talk, and now I invite Dr. Sharma for his presentation and the expert talk. Dr. Sharma, please.
Thank you, Mr. Rishia. So, should I start now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are already 15-20 minutes late. People have been waiting. Thank you for patient hearing. Mr. Varghese, there is one dialog box coming on my screen. So, this is regarding waiting room. Waiting room.
Yeah.
Can you please?
Okay, I'll remove you. Okay, yeah, I'll make it.
Yeah. So then I can see.
That will continuously pop in because you are a co-host, na sir. I'll make you.
So if you can do, then do. Otherwise, okay.
I'll remove you as a co-host. Then otherwise, it will pop on to the host and.
Okay, you do it. But then meantime, I'm going to start. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Now it's gone.
Yeah.
Now it's gone.
Yeah, it has gone. Yeah.
So very good afternoon to all the participants and guests. As the screen shows, the topic of today's talk is aim, planning and interpretation of in situ testing in concrete structures. So as we all know that in situ testing in concrete structures, which also means in place testing of concrete structures, is now becoming very popular, and many structures, they need it for different reasons, which we will be talking in today's lecture. Now, I will be essentially covering, as you can see the topic, the three different components related to in-place testing or in-situ testing. I will be explaining what are the aims of testing, because there are different aims. It should be clear right in the beginning. Otherwise, we might choose wrong testing program, and then we end up getting results which we didn't want. All right. So to avoid all those problems, aim should be clear right in the beginning. Then accordingly, once the aim is established, we have to plan the tests. Test program has to be planned properly. And then the most important job, and rather the most difficult job, is how do we interpret the results once the results are available after the testing is over. So there are generally three types of testing programs for in situ testing. As you can see on the screen, there are three types of testing programs. First is control testing, then second is compliance testing, and then secondary testing. Now, control testing will not be something we will be talking about, but I'll explain you very, very quickly what does it mean. Control testing is a testing which a concrete manufacturer or contractor carries out in the beginning of the construction of a particular structure in order to fine tune or in order to adjust the concrete mix. So whatever testing is required at that particular stage, that is called control testing. Of course, it is related to in situ condition. That is why it is being put in the category of in situ testing, but then it is not something we will be talking about. We will be talking about something which is related to hardened concrete. Now, having said that, the second is compliance testing. Now, compliance testing is a testing which is decided right in the beginning, before the structure before the construction is started. All those tests, all the testing program, which is agreed upon between different stakeholders, and it can include. Cube testing is also part of compliance testing, and then apart from that, other types of tests which now many codes world over have started mentioning, like different kinds of NDT tests or other partially destructive tests, which people are now recommending. People are recommending that they should also be carried out along with the cube testing, because cubes are not. They are considered not to represent the concrete quality properly, because there are many operations which are carried out after the cubes are cast. So they are not that they do not represent the quality of the concrete in a proper way. That is why it is now agreed upon that apart from cube tests or other kind of tests which are currently being carried out, we should also carry out in situ non-destructive tests. And if we do that, and then all those things are declared right in the beginning, agreed upon, they are there in the part of the tender document, then they form part of the second type of testing program, which is compliance testing. So cube tests or NDT tests which are declared before the construction, they will form part of compliance testing. So as the name suggests, compliance testing means just to check the compliance of the specifications. That is the purpose. Of course, cube testing is also carried out because of that only. And then before I go ahead, let me tell you, we all know it, but just I'm trying to refocus your attention towards this particular fact, that on one hand, people are saying that, or we also know that cubes do not represent the quality of the concrete in a thorough fashion. But on the other hand, that is also true, especially in our context, that even people do not do cube testing properly. So with these words, I'll now go ahead and talk about the compliance testing and secondary testing. Now, secondary testing is all those types of testing programs on hardened concrete or on the built structural component or structures which were not planned beforehand, or which were not part of the tender document. So all the testings, all the in-place tests, all the in-situ tests which are carried out as an afterthought, or when something is suspect, or some problem happens, or it is old structure, some deterioration has happened. There are many other reasons also. I'll tell you that in the subsequent slides. So there are so secondary testing would be any type of in situ testing which is not planned before the construction of the structure. Now you can see different types of typical compliance tests for RCC structures. Now, compliance test, which I just mentioned in the previous slide, they can be part of the second type of testing program, which was the compliance testing. They can even be part of the secondary testing also. Means when we carry out testing on a newly built structure in order to carry out quality audit, or in order to check the compliance of the structure with the design specifications, that is compliance test. But of course, they can form part of both the types of testing programs, compliance as well as secondary testing. So if all these tests were planned beforehand, they form part of the second type of testing. If they were not planned beforehand. They are being carried out because something has gone wrong. There is some kind of suspicion or any other kind of a problem. If then you are doing testing on a newly built structure, then it will of course be secondary testing, but still the type of test will essentially be similar in nature. What could be these tests? These are some typical tests which generally are carried out, but then we can always add few more tests also. For example, visual inspection is always part of any testing program, and a naked eye always gives an idea about the overall quality of construction. We can see the exposed concrete surfaces. We can note other symptoms of good quality of construction or bad quality of construction. They can all be noted down during visual inspection, which we generally call as a clinical examination, if you want to draw analogy between medical inspection kind of a thing, right? So now second is rebound hammer and UPV testing or core tests. The purpose is to find out in situ strength of the concrete and quality of the concrete, because in situ strength assessment of the concrete is always a very, very urgent thing which is always required, be it as a compliance test or as a part of secondary testing of old structures. Strength of the concrete is always required because so many properties are connected to strength of the concrete, and there are so many methods. We'll talk about that later on. Just some few commonly performed tests are mentioned over here. Rebound hammer, UPV, core tests can be performed. We also are required to check the vulnerability of a constructed structure and carry out number of tests. So with the promotion of durability design or life design methodologies nowadays, so durability performance investigations or testing is now becoming very, very hot topic. So there also very soon you will see that in the codes durability performance investigation will be there, and then we always be required to carry out those tests, but that is something we expect to happen in future. So but otherwise we in order to check the durability vulnerability of a newly built structure, we should carry out some tests like chemical makeup. We should find out whether chlorides are there in the concrete, what is the pH value. We can find the cover thickness in order to check its compliance with the specified thicknesses. We should find out in situ permeability of the concrete. Resistivity of the concrete is required in order to check its vulnerability against corrosion. So these tests can be carried out as part of durability vulnerability assessment of a newly built concrete structure. Now rebar locator and GPR, this is also required in order to check the compliance of the number of bars and spacing of the bars with those given in the drawings. So in the drawings we know that for a newly built structure that this is the detailing given in the drawing. So in order to verify that, so randomly we can check at a few locations. A number of locations, all that we will talk in subsequent slides. But by using GPR or by rebar locator, we can find out the number of bars. Even dia can also be found by using some recently developed equipments. And then of course spacing can be found, and then we can check the compliance. Member size, dimension and measurement. We can use normal measuring equipments. We can use laser techniques in order to check the dimensions, and we can check the compliance, the sizes of the spaces and size of the structural members also, and then compare with the drawings. Total station can be used to check liner level, especially in the case of tall structure like chimneys. This is very, very important. So we have to find out liner level, and then tolerances are there in the codes. We have to check that also. And then material sampling can be carried out. We can take the samples of concrete. We can take the samples of non-structural things also, like especially in RCC frame structures, infill panel, these wall bricks and mortars, plaster. These samples can be taken, and then we can bring them to the laboratory and then find out the ratios. We can check their quality. All those tests can be performed. So if we do all these tests on a newly built structure, and then we see that largely things are in place, then we can say that as far as construction quality, both with respect to material and workmanship is concerned, that is fine, and then everything is as per the specification. If something is wrong somewhere, then corrective measures are to be taken. Now, typical secondary testing program, which I said, of course, compliance testing can also be secondary testing if it is not planned beforehand. I have already explained you that. But then secondary tests generally are, uh, as I said, they cover both the test, unplanned test on a newly built structure, and then testing of old structures. And then testing of old structure can be because of many needs, many reasons. They are coming in the next slide. But then different typical testing programs which form the part of secondary testing are given in this particular table. As I said, compliance testing can be there. Second is in situ strength assessment of existing or old structures. Now, old structure, very often we are required to compute the structural adequacy or structural capacity of different members and the structure as a whole. Then for that, we have to find out in situ strength of concrete. Very, very important. So in old structure, that is required to be found. This is one type of a secondary testing. Now, durability testing of an existing structure. And then aim is to know the cause and extent of deterioration, means to find out the cause of the problem. If we figure out some kind of a deterioration, some kind of a problem, and then also to know the extent of the problem, or to quantify the problem, so that appropriate restoration and rehabilitation measures can be designed. So of course, most common example is corrosion. So for corrosion, we have to carry out number of tests, and then we have to find out cause of the corrosion, extent of the corrosion, and then we have to design the rehabilitation, repair, or restoration strategy accordingly. Another type of a typical testing, program which is a part of a secondary testing is test for localized concrete integrity. Many times there is some localized problem, and then this localized problem could be in the form of there is some delamination somewhere, some internal cavity, some crack, some internal cracks, some kind of fault has been noticed somewhere because some global performance of structure or structural component has been found to be not within the permissible limits. Because of that, something is suspected. So that is required to be found out. And for that, there are a number of tests nowadays. Tomography can be done. We can do impactic or pulse echo techniques can be used. We can use radar techniques, infrared thermography. All those techniques, they form part of this 4th type of testing program. And then testing for this structural performance, overall structural performance. Many times full-scale load test is required to be done. If there is problem in the material, in the components, then finally it is agreed upon that let us carry out the full-scale load test, and then that is one form of testing for structural performance. Or we can, other types of tests could be structural health monitoring. Those tests can be part of the testing for structural performance. So these are all different typical testing programs. There can be many more also which can be part of secondary testing. Now, as I said, there are different needs of doing all these secondary test programs. They are written over here. I'll just quickly explain them. If there is a change in the usage of the structure, for example, somebody wants to convert a particular structure in some other forms. For example, a residential building is to be converted to some kind of a commercial building. So change is there. So adequacy has to be checked because the live load requirements and all other serviceability requirements are going to change. So a condition assessment is required, or secondary testing is required. A 4-story building, 2 more floors are to be added. Vertical expansion, horizontal expansion, or some kind of expansion or modification is required. Then condition assessment or adequacy of existing structure is required to be carried out. That is the first need written over here. Second is acceptability of a structure for purchase or insurance. If somebody wants to purchase a particular building, particular structure, he or she may say that I want to get it audited. I want to get its structural audit done. So that is also one form of a secondary testing, because testing would be required there. Assessment of structural integrity or safety following material. If after some time, a few years, if we see some kind of a deterioration happening, or some kind of a damage has been caused because of some kind of overloading or some kind of accident, like fire, blast, fatigue, or other kind of thing, something has been caused, some damage has been caused, then also we have to carry out assessment. So that is one example of, or one type of a need of secondary testing. serviceability or adequacy of members known or suspected to contain material which does not meet the specification, specification or design faults are noted, then also you have to carry out all those tests which I just mentioned in the previous slide. Assessment of cause and extent of deterioration as a preliminary to the design of different repair or restoration schemes, methods. Then of course, secondary testing is required to be carried out. Assessment of quality and integrity of applied repair. Yes, of course, we have not reached, especially in India, to that extent. Only in few cases I have seen that people now, once you have done the repair restoration, we assume that everything is over. Actually, it is not. Many times what we have seen that repairs are not done properly, and then quality of the repair itself is required to be checked. So, so that is also one form of secondary testing. Then, of course, monitoring of long-term changes may be required for some time, especially in academic reasons. So these are all. Now, what is the sequence of testing? Testing program planning. If you can see, as I said that aim of testing should be clear right in the beginning. Only we will be able to plan our tests properly, and then also we will be able to interpret the results properly, and then we will come out with some meaningful conclusions only then if we have established the aims right in the beginning. So aim of testing is required, and then you can take the cue, you can take the idea from the previous slide that how whether it is a compliance testing or whether it is a secondary testing. And if it is secondary testing, is it because adequacy of an old structure is required in order to do some kind of expansion of the structure or some detail? That aim has to be clearly defined right in the beginning. Then thereafter, once the aim is clear, then the investigator has to make a list that what kind of documents are required related to that particular structure. So that documentation list has to be prepared. That is the meaning of the second particular thing written over here. Then visual inspection. Always we start any kind of a testing program, be it compliance testing or be it secondary testing, with visual inspection. But you can see here it is written preliminary site visit. Inspection, visual inspection is written over here in two different stages, one here and another one here. Now, preliminary site visit is required sometimes in order to decide the scope of the work. That could be one reason. Another reason could be in order to understand the structure. And other reason could be that if, for example, fire has occurred somewhere or some kind of disaster has struck that particular structure, then there could be an issue of safety also, immediate safety. You might be recommending some kind of propping, some kind of evacuation there. So immediate preliminary site visit is required. So that is the purpose of writing over. So this is to be undertaken immediately, especially in the cases when some kind of a disaster like fire, earthquake, or other kind of thing, I mean cyclones, they have caused some kind of a damage to the structure. So this is required in order to, of course, scope of the work will be decided during this visit, but then more important is to advise evacuation or to advise some kind of a propping, some kind of demolition maybe, that can be advised this particular preliminary site visit. Then the next is a meeting should be conducted with all the stakeholders, with the client and others, to agree upon interpretation criteria. This is very, very important. Otherwise, there would be disputes. Once you submit the report, then many of you might have seen that people, I mean, the client, the owner would not agree that I don't agree with the result. There is some problem. Or owner agrees, contractor doesn't agree with the investigator. So in order to avoid that, all those kinds of problems, a meeting should be held between all the stakeholders, and we should agree upon the interpretation criteria that I mean, we will plan or we'll carry out these types of tests, and then based on this, we will we'll decide our acceptance in this particular fashion. Now you can see there's a vertical bar over here. This is interpretation, analysis and interpretation. Interpretation is in fact a ongoing process. It is not something when entire testing is over, then only you will carry out interpretation. Interpretation is an ongoing process, dynamic process. It goes right along with all different tests. Now in this flow chart, you might not be even be going to the third stage, or even maybe not second stage sometimes, because if your cost, effort, time does not permit that, or the condition structure is such that there is no need of going to second stage, you can stop over here. Means what I want to say is that if structure has been damaged to such a huge extent that even after a preliminary site visit, the engineer who is doing the investigation is confident enough to say that let us demolish this structure. It was 80 years old structure. It has been hugely damaged by the fire or by earthquake, that there is no point in doing any kind of a testing. It's okay. So that is the interpretation criteria. You go over here and that's it, and then you can documentation the results, right? Now if you want to go further, systematic visual inspection and initial testing, test selection has to be carried out. So then, I mean, after preliminary visit, if it is done, it may not be required, as I said, in some cases. So you go to the more detailed visual inspection, which is also called visual inspection with distress mapping, where you carry out detailed inspection of all the structural elements under investigation. You note down, you make a note of all the symptoms of distress. You can find out crack widths. You can know the extent of the cracks. You note down all other symptoms of distress. You take photographs. I mean, detailed visual inspection is carried out. That is the next step. Sometimes things may be over by then also. You can go here, carry out analysis, or another reason could be that the budget doesn't permit for this year, only up to visual inspection, or it is seen that things are not very bad. Let us wait for a few months. Things are not that bad, or the owner says that my budget doesn't permit me to carry out repairs or some kind of intervention right now. I would like to wait. You can go here, right? You can document the results and wait for some time. But otherwise, if you want to go further, okay, then let us go further and now enter the stage number 2, which is NDT testing, which is in place testing, in situ testing. Here the word NDT is written, but then NDT was a term which was used when these tests were invented 4 or 5 decades ago. Now over the years, now there are many partially destructive tests also, which have found their application in many situations. So they also form part of the second stage, this NDT only. But ideally they are not NDT, they are partially destructive tests. Now here, if NDT or in situ tests are carried out, they can be of 2 different types. 2 different types of assessments, 2 different types of testings can be carried out under any, I mean, for example, comparative assessment. When I said any means the 2 aims which we had talked about, right? It could be compliance testing, it could be secondary testing. This entire thing is applicable to any kind of a testing program. Now, under both these testing programs, we can only confine ourselves only to comparative assessment, or we can do calibrated assessment. Many times both are required, or most of the time both are required. In some cases, first may be all right. Now, what do you mean by comparative survey? Comparative survey means when you carry out the chosen NDT tests on different concrete elements of that particular structure under investigation, and then you just carry out the comparison of all those observations. You do not relate the NDT test property which you have found using that NDT test. For example, if rebound hammer is being used, you will come to know rebound number. You are not going further and you are relating the rebound number to the strength. You are just using rebound numbers only, pulse velocity only. So you take these measurements and then you compare them. Here the confidence level is very accuracy is very high if you are not relating it to the further any other property. You are just comparing these values. So many times this is required. Situations we'll discuss later on in the presentation. So this is part of comparative survey. You can go here and then reporting can be done. All right. Otherwise, if you have to relate, which generally we are required because we are so much attached with the concrete compressive strength of the concrete, so much obsessed with that we always need it. So we will always like to relate rebound number, pulse velocity, or any other kind of NDT property which we have found by using a certain NDT test We would like to relate it to in situ strength of the concrete. So if that is to be done, which is a very, very challenging job, it is not that easy, which people generally do in the field, that using standard calibration charts, they just relate rebound number with the strength and then they say this is the strength. So it is not that simple. It's very, very difficult. So, but if you have chosen to do that, then that is calibrated assessments. Any entity test which you have performed, if you go ahead and relate that to strength, you go ahead and relate that to modulus of velocity, you go ahead and relate to some other mechanical property of the concrete, that is called calibrated assessment. So again, as I said, this is a ongoing process of reporting and interpretation. So this can be done, and then from here you just go and then you go to the conclusion and write the report. Sometimes, which I generally do not recommend because load testing is very, very cumbersome thing. Of course, coring can be done. If you do not stop over here, then you carry out the third stage testing, which is load testing. In fact, coring or breakout tests, why I have put it here is that as per our standard guidelines, when you go wrong here, then only the codes say that core should be extracted and you have to check the compliance with respect to concrete strength. Then it's okay. If cores are fine, then you say that everything is all right. Otherwise, cores are required even here also. In calibrated assessment, we'll talk about that later on. So here further testing, I essentially meant load testing. So load tests are full-scale tests. There are risks also, very, very difficult. Should be carried out only in unavoidable circumstances. So you just go here and make a conclusion. So this is a broad flow chart of the whole testing program. Now, test selection, if testing for concrete strength is to be carried out, is required, which I said could be a part of compliance testing, could be part of secondary testing, and further in the secondary testing, it could be part of all different types of testing programs also. If in situ assessment of the strength, which is generally required in all testing programs, whether it is compliance or secondary, and further in secondary or compliance, any other type of a testing, this is something which is always done. Now this table just shows you some important features about different types of tests which generally are required, which generally are carried out. In order to assess the strength of the concrete, coring is done, and cores are most reliable. You can see the last column, reliability of absolute strength correlations. This is the best in the case of cores, but then cores are costly, speed is slow, damage will be there, representation is moderate, means it's okay. Representation is moderate and good also, but then more importantly, reliability is very, very good. Why it was moderate? Because this strength will be corresponding to the location from where the core has been extracted. But if you have extracted huge number of cores, which you generally do not do, then it can be written as good also, but generally it is moderate. So, but reliability is good. So cores generally give you a direct, good reliable assessment of the strength of the concrete. But then, as I said, cores will endanger the safety of the member, tedious, they will cause damage. So excessive number of coring is not recommended. Cores are only extracted to that extent, or only those many number of cores are extracted which are required for developing a calibration between the entity property and the compressive strength of the concrete. Pull-out tests and penetration resistance tests, for both, their reliability is moderate. So cut and pull out capo test or lock test, this is part of pull-out test. Penetration resistance test examples are Windsor Pro, pin penetration. They are all examples of those tests. They're not very common, but then pull-out test, especially capo test, is very good for old structures. So its reliability is better than what people are generally using, these last two ones, UPV and rebound Hammond tests. They are very easy to perform them and their reliability is poor. So they can be turned into a good reliable result if you take into account, or if you make correction for all the influencing parameters, which are huge in number in these two types of tests. Here the influencing parameters are less. That is why performing them is slightly difficult, but then reliability is better than these two tests. So So this is the overall, I mean, there are other break-off tests, pull-off test is performed or even to check the efficacy of the repairs also, but then you can use it to check to determine the tensile strength of the concrete. Break-off test gives you, in fact, an idea about the flexural strength of in situ concrete. Internal fracture tests are also becoming important, but then it is not a very commonly found test. UPV and rebound test, surface hardness tests, they are the most common ones. All other things are okay, but then the reliability is poor. But then, as I said, you can make them moderately reliable if you take into account the influence of, I mean, you make correction for all the influencing parameters. Now, durability tests, which are also required for in both the type of testing programs. Some of them would be required for as a part of compliance testing, and remaining ones would be required as a part of secondary testing. You can see this is a list. I'll not read it, but then you can see many of them you must be familiar with. Cover measurements are required in order to check the in compliance testing. Of course, we had mentioned this with respect to checking the compliance with the design specifications, whether the proper cover was given, thickness was given, so that we can say that whether the enough durability will remain in the future life or not. But if it's old structure, cover can be checked whether it was provided, I mean, original cover was sufficient or not, because that will let you know if some problem has been seen. For example, if carbonation has been seen, corrosion has been seen, generally you will see that it is at the location where cover was not proper. So cover measurement is required. Carbonation depth is required in order to find the cause of the corrosion. If it is because of carbonation, chloride content is required to be found. There are different methods. Half cell potential and resistivity is required. These three tests are required to know the cause of the corrosion. These two tests are required in order to check the whether the corrosion is active right at the time of testing, and further in order to demarcate the corroding areas and non-corroding areas, so that you can carry out these rate of corrosion tests on the corroding areas in order to find out the rate of corrosion. So all these tests are performed to know the cause of the corrosion and to know the extent of the corrosion, so that proper repair and restoration can be designed based on this. Now, absorption diffusion tests are also required as a part of durability performance verification for a new structure, or they can also be found on an old structure. This will add to making your judgment about the cause of the corrosion. If concrete in the cover zone was having poor absorption properties, diffusion properties were poor, you can see that that is the reason this carbonation has traveled so fast. So that is the reason that chloride ion has traveled so fast. Similarly, permeability tests can be performed, both air and water permeability can be found. And then this will also be giving you an idea about the cause of the corrosion if it is an old structure. In a new structure, as a part of compliance testing, you can say that the permeability coefficient, depending on which permeability test you are performing. So you can say that whether permeability is fine if it is new structure. You will be okay in the times to come if it is coefficient is all right. And then there are other. Now, the most important, the question which is always in our mind when we go to the site, when we start, now we have established the aim of testing. We have also largely understood that what would be the sequence of tests, to what extent we are going, whether we are going to, we are restricting ourselves only to visual inspection, or we are going to the stage of in situ testing, where we will be performing both comparative and calibrated assessment. Both will be done. So if you have decided that, now we go to the site, go to the building, and we have to start the tests. Tests, as I said, tests have been selected. Now, how many tests? How many tests at one location? How many tests should be carried out so that they will represent one reliable observation point? And also, how many observations should be taken on one complete structure? That is the biggest question in our minds. So you can see in this table, these are, I mean, this of course, the table shows the number of tests only for the strength assessment test. But then there are similar guidelines available now, books and codes. Some of them are mentioned over here and at the end of the presentation. Their guidance is given even for the other types of tests, like durability tests also. But as the strength assessment is always the most common type of testing program and tests for them, I have put the number of tests to be carried out at one location, which will form one observation. For example, if you want to take one core observation at one location, then 3 cores should be taken. Standard cores. Standard means 100 by 200 size cores. Small cores means when you are not using standard size, it is less than 4 inches, 3 inches or 2 inches, because guidelines allow that if the aggregate size is something, then core diameter could be has to be more than 3 times the aggregate size. So for 20 mm aggregate, 3-inch core would be okay, but then that is not standard core. That will be small core, right? So small cores, if you're going with that, their uncertainty is so huge. There are other problems which we are not covering in today's lecture. Sorry. So there we should take 9 cores. More number of cores are always recommended. 12 readings should be taken one location. UPV 1 is fine. Internal fracture test 6. Penetration resistance test like 3. Pull out, as I said, capo test 4 readings should be taken. Pull off test, pull off machine is 6 readings should be taken one location. Break off 5. So these many readings should be taken at one location. Average of that will give you the observation at one location. Now, okay, so one location is fine. Now, how many locations one should take in an entire structure? That will depend upon what is the aim of the observation. What is the aim of the testing? All right, compliance testing or secondary testing means it is a quality audit of a new structure, which is compliance testing, or it is a secondary testing of old structure, for example. Depending upon that, the numbers will depend on, and then also where we should carry out the tests. Numbers, and that is not a very straightforward answer to that. There are so many problems because there are uncertainties coming from so many things: type of a test chosen, operator's bias, the concrete variability, the difference between in-place strength and the standard specimen strength. There are so many sources from there. The uncertainty is coming into the picture, and because of that, a very judicious and informed decision is always to be taken about the number of tests. There is some guidance available in the books, in the codes. One code is mentioned. Code means the guidance. This ACI American Concrete Institute Committee report is ACI 228. 1 hour is for strength assessment. There is a guidance given in this about that how you can take how many number of tests should be taken. The general guidance is that the structure, if all the elements are the same concrete, they appear to be the same category, you divide all the elements in one category, then you have to randomly take the number of observations on those all the elements which you are saying they are forming one part of category, right? For example, if columns are all M30, you can say all columns are one category. Beams and slabs are M25, you can say 20, they are all one category. So all columns, now how many observations you have to take? You have to follow the principles of random sampling. So that is given in ASTM C 823 also, and then it is given in ACI 228 also. You can take guidance from there. But then I'll tell you a thumb rule. Thumb rule is that for every 75 cubic meter of concrete, you can take 10 observations of UPV. You can take 10 observations. 10 means 10 number of locations, I am saying. So 10 locations of UPV, 10 locations. This is a minimum. More is always welcome. So 10 locations of UPV, 10 locations of rebound, and 10 locations of pull out if you're going for capo test also. So means, and for every additional 15 cubic meter, you have to add on, keep on adding one location. So if you see that in one column, approximately 1 to 1.5 cubic meter of concrete would be there. So in one group, you can find out how many columns are there. You can find out how much of concrete is there. Then you can find out, then you can say that this is the minimum number of locations I'll choose. Then, of course, the rules of principles of random sampling are to be used in order to confirm this. But then if that you are not doing, this thumb rule you can follow. and then you can choose a number of locations. More are always welcome. But then, of course, some important information is coming into the further slides also, which will help you in making a decision about where the reading should be taken. And then if you have a structure where as I said, one set of readings in columns, one type category, another in beams and slabs. Or if the third category, you can take another category accordingly. And for each category, random sampling rules are to be followed in choosing that. But if it is an old structure, and then you see that or damage has been caused because of fire or something, one category is damaged, another category is undamaged. You might not be knowing about the grade of the concrete there. You can divide then categories accordingly. So on the damaged category, you in old structure try to cover all categories: severely damaged, moderately damaged, and in good condition. Try to cover all, divide in different categories. For each category, follow the rules of random sampling or this thumb rule which I said, and then you can just choose a number of locations. And on each location, you should do these tests. As I said, average of this will give a number of tests. There's some more guidance given over here in these slides, which will let you know, which will also help you in making a decision where exactly you should take the reading in beam, column, slab, or wall after deciding the number of locations. Now you know that when you do concreting of different kinds of elements, some of them are shown over here. There is a variability coming from supply of the concrete, variability coming from curing, variability coming from compaction, placement, so many sources. So variability of supply is something which does not follow any pattern. Variability of compaction and curing in different elements that largely follow a certain pattern. That still can be found out to some extent, but supply variability is always random. That is difficult to be figured out precisely. But because of all those issues, you will see that the concrete strength will always vary along the height. This is the variation along the height shown over here. If bottom we say that it is, if you try to show it with respect to the strength at the bottom of the member, you will see that in the beam and the wall, the variation is largely uniform. All right, it is going. You can see bottom and top. Top could be even 50 to 60, 70% also. Top is very less, almost half of what you see at the bottom. Columns and slabs. Slabs, when I say generally slabs are 6 inch, 7, 8 inch. If the slabs are very, very thick, which is very rare, then you have to take that into category of beam also. There in the column and slab, it is generally seen that the variation is happening only in the top 20 to 25% thickness. Otherwise, largely it is okay. So this is the natural variation which would be there. So now, when you are doing compliance testing means you are checking the compliance of the concrete. So then you will try to take reading towards the bottom side. I'm not saying exactly at the bottom. There are limitations of different methods of test. So keeping all this in mind, try to take reading towards the bottom, because if you take the reading towards the upper side, you will get a lower value of the strength, and which is not the fault of the contractor, because this is something because of the hydrostatic pressure in the bottom side of the pore, because of natural reasons of gravity, because when you do the concreting, the aggregates will try to settle down, water and the paste will try to come off. This is something which is not in control, which is natural thing. So this you will try to take the reading towards the bottom side if it is compliance testing. But if it is secondary testing, where your aim is to find out the strength of the concrete in order to check the capacity of the element, so that you can find the capacity of the member and then structure as a whole in order to design some kind of retrofitting or something. There you can be on the conservative side. You take the reading towards the upper side. All right, you can take somewhere here. Generally, we take the readings. We generally restrict ourselves from here to here, from 3/4 to 1/4. If it is compliance, you will take reading somewhere here. If it is secondary testing, there you can go somewhere here. So this is about that. And then these two figures, they just explain you contours of for a beam and for the wall. You can see, because of the variability in supply and because of compaction, you will see that in the wall you can have this kind of variation of the concrete strength. These are along the heights, but then variation along the plan, which are not shown over here, is also there. In a slab, in a beam of course the corner is not, but then generally if you talk about the plan variation, it is generally seen that towards the corners the strength of the concrete is always lesser compared to the middle portion of the concrete, because of the problem which I just said, because of the variations of supply, compaction, curing and placement, all those things. Now another challenge, another problem from where the uncertainty comes, and which also becomes important from the point of view of deciding our acceptance criteria of in place values, in place strength values, or in place value of any other entity property, is the difference between the strength of a standard specimen and the strength of the concrete in situ. There are differences because of so many issues which I just mentioned, and then other issues are that standard specimen is always cast, cured, and all those things are quite different in the actual structure. And because of that, interesting thing is that you can see what is the variation. The typical 28 days in situ equivalent wet cube strength as percentage of standard cube strength, it could be in the column, it could be in the range of 55 to 75%. Wall, it could be 45 to 95%. This is something which is generally seen in well-built column. It is not something because there is some poor quality of the construction. It is something happening because of some natural reasons, automatic reasons. This is another slide which explains you, for example, by taking one example. If I take the example of M35 grade, for example, there is a particular element. Different elements are shown over here. You can see column, wall, beam, and slab. This is top side and bottom side. If I choose M35 grade, for M35 grade, my mean standard target strength would be, cube strength would be in this range. If I'm using cylinder strength, it would be in this range. Of course, for M35 grade, when I said this is cube strength, for that the cylinder strength would be lower. So this is the target cylinder strength, target cube strength. This was which was specified. Actually, which you obtain in the field after doing everything properly. In the column bottom, you will get the values in this range. These are some typical ranges based on the data provided by earlier researches, and also based on the field observations. This is 20 to 27 at top. For the wall, this range, you can see bottom and top, there is huge variation. So where you are taking the reading, you should keep in mind this variation. I mean, and also aim of a testing. Then only the judgment has to be made. Now coming to, after talking about the number of tests, the location of the tests briefly, now let us come to the interpretation of the results. Once you have already done the tests in a given structure, I mean chosen type of a test, it has been performed, and then readings are in front of us. Now interpretation is the job, next job, so that we can decide the acceptability if it is a compliance scenario, or we have to find out structural capacity if it is the case of secondary testing, where you are talking about coming out with the adequacy of existing structure. Now, under interpretation, there are two ways of making interpretations. One is variability of the results is very important. Variability of the results is required to be found. This is very, very important for compliance testing, for newly constructed structure. It could be form of compliance, or it could be form of a secondary, where you are doing secondary testing on a new structure. Aim is compliance only. It means compliance testing, their variability is very, very important. The variability of could be in terms of strength, it could be in terms of any other property, but I am presenting in terms of strength. Some typical variations are shown over here in the form of histogram, or you can, if you go back, you can even show that in the form of contours also. Like here, you can show the variations in the form of contours, any kind of entity property. As I said, here I am showing strength. It could be, for example, if you are doing corrosion tests, half cell resistivity tests are being performed, you can plot their contours. So contours color coded contours will let you know that what are the corroding areas, what are the non-corroding areas. Similarly, for strength, for other rebound hammer or UPB tests also, you can plot the contours or you can plot the histograms. So histograms are shown in this particular slide. So if you get this particular normal distribution kind of a scenario where you get a one peak with concrete also. Here the workmanship quality of the concrete is good. One quality of concrete has been used. Here you can see in this case, tail is long, so quality is not that good. So on the newly built structure, in terms of strength, in terms of any other entity property, I mean, you can draw the similar kind of a thing in terms of rebound number also, in terms of UPV, in terms of pull-out resistance, any property. So you can compare the values. So this comparison here with respect to this kind of assessment, the application of in-place methods or entity methods is huge. The methods are very good, reliability, accuracy is very huge, good. So this is one way of making your interpretation. But another way of assessing the variability is that you can find numerically their values of some statistical parameters. Like for different types of strength tests, you can find out coefficient of variation from the results which you have taken, and then you can compare them with normally acceptable ranges, normally acceptable values given in this particular type. This is just general guidance. For 95% confidence levels, the percentage accuracy for different tests are shown over here, and then typical coefficient of variation is given over here. So if you are getting the values which you have computed from the entity in place tests which you have performed, the variations found in terms of coefficient of variation, you can compare you can see whether they are in this particular range or not. These values are for a single unit which has been cast from number of batches. But if you are talking about a structure as a whole, where there are so many units and number of batches are different, then you can slightly increase the coefficient of variation, and then a proper informed decision can be taken about the acceptance criteria about COV. But then this is just a general guidance for if you want to find the actual value of the variation in terms of COV, and then you want to take a decision accordingly. And then this COV, this coefficient of variation is not independent of the concrete strength. Generally, it is seen that it is dependent upon concrete strength. It is, you can see coefficient of variation will be going down as the concrete strength, or when you are using I mean special concretes, you can say high strength concrete, lightweight concrete, self-compacting concretes. There it is expected that you go toward this side. So for both control specimens and for in situ strength assessment, the curves are given over here. And for different types of quality controls, you can find out that how much should be the coefficient of variation. So this can also be taken as a guidance to make a decision about the variability, and then also about the acceptance of the concrete based on this. But most oftenly, we are required to enter into calibrated assessment, and especially with respect to strength of the concrete, when we carry out tests and when we do the interpretation. If that has been decided, and since strength, concrete strength knowledge is required, it is required for compliance, or it could be part of secondary testing. If it is required, then you have to use a calibration chart. Now, calibration chart is very, very important. You should have a proper calibration chart made, which standard chart should be avoided. Standard chart given by the manufacturer should be avoided, because that has been prepared using a concrete which is not representative of the concrete which is under investigation. So if you choose to use that chart, standard chart, then you will have to apply so many correction factors whose number will depend upon which type of test you are doing. Especially if you are doing UPB and rebound hammer, there are huge number of corrections which are required to be applied in order to get a judicious or reliable value of concrete strength at a particular point where rebound observation has been taken. So standard chart should be avoided. You should prepare a site specific chart. Now site specific chart for a new structure when you're talking with respect to compliance testing. If it is new structure, as a part of compliance testing, you should prepare a chart by using concrete of the field, which is being used in the field for different ages. So you can take cubes, you can cast cubes using the material which is being used for different elements at different ages, different stages of construction. And you can keep on using those cubes, bring to the laboratory, take the rebound number, take UPB or whatever entity test you have chosen to use later on in compliance testing of the concrete. So you can develop on that particular cube which has been prepared using site concrete on new structure. But if it is a old structure and it is a secondary testing, cubes are not available. There the cores are to be extracted. So generally the guidance available in the codes and also based on our experience, generally for each grade of concrete you should take 9 cores. Means 3 locations should be chosen. Means 1 location will give you 3 cores. Average of that one observation. So 3 observations should be taken for each grade. So 9, and for each observation, each location, you should take the corresponding entity value also. Then develop a proper calibration chart using those equivalent cube strengths taken from the codes. So that way you can develop calibration chart for secondary testing scenario, or you can develop a chart using cubes for the compliance testing scenario. But in both the cases, you have to use site-specific chart. So if you have prepared a good chart, reliable chart, and for each chart will give you, this chart will give you corresponding to each entity value, each observation point, you will come to know the corresponding equivalent cube strength. That is the in-place cube strength which you will get. Now, what next? What is to be done? So you will come to know at all the chosen locations the value of equivalent cube strength, which is in-place strength. How do you decide whether it is okay or not? Generally, what people say, they directly compare each value with the characteristics use 95% confidence level. And if you have chosen to use this standard equation, which was used for this 5 percentile or FCK characteristic strength by using lower 5 percentile case, which you generally use for standard specimens. So if you have chosen to use that only, then okay, we can use it. And then here, this is corresponding to not corresponding to normal distribution, where the quality control is good. But if it is not, quality of the concrete is bad, then in that case distribution could be log normal also. In that case, you have to use the log values of the strengths shown over here. And anything we have chosen to use, depending upon the quality of the concrete, what we will do is that FCK will be found by using this. FM is the average, or this is the mean in-place cube strength, in-place equivalent cube strength, which you will compute from the in-place cube strength values. Minus K is the value which we generally take 1.64 for 95% confidence level when the sufficient number of readings, more than 50 are taken. So we can take 1.64. But let me tell you that nowadays there are many codes, especially ACI 228, that allows that when you do these kinds of assessment, we might not be talking about 95% confidence level. We can even go to ACI 228 even says that we can allow confidence level as low as 75% in ordinary structures. in important structure it says 90%. Only in very, very important structure it says that we have to choose a confidence level of 95%. So we can take decision accordingly. We might not be always be using the value corresponding to 95% confidence level. But if we are choosing 95% confidence level and we have chosen tolerance factor as 1.64, then we can choose this, and S standard deviation from the in situ cube strength results which we have found after doing test, that will be known, that can be computed. So we'll come to know the FCK value. This grade can be found, means characteristic strength, in place characteristic strength I am saying, that can be found by using this equation. If we do not have more than 50 number of observations, we are having lesser observations, then this table can be used to choose the K value for 95% confidence level. And if we have chosen even not to use 95% confidence level, we have chosen to go to 90% to 75%, then there is a guidance given in ASA 228 also. We can choose accordingly the value of the K accordingly from there. So and then, as I said, we can use this equation which is corresponding to normal distribution. We can choose the log normal if the quality is found to be relatively not of that standard. So anything can be chosen, and then we can find out the value of characteristic strength FCK. Once FCK has been found, you will come to know FCK of in place strength. Now, acceptance criteria, you have to compare this with the one which is specified. For example, specified was M30, and now you are getting it to be 28. It is not failing. So because here you have to apply your judgment, knowledge of the variability of the concrete, or all those things which we have talked about in the previous slides. Difference between standard specimen and field conditions, all those things are to be kept in mind. And there is some guidance given in the codes or guidelines, ASA 228 guidelines or other codes. They say that what you can do is that it's FCK, average FCK, if it is more than 85%, all right, or more than 0.85 times the FCK specified, you can say that it's specified. It is acceptable. And any individual result, if it is more than 75% of the specified FCK, you can say that this is acceptable. So acceptance criteria has to be developed in this particular way, keeping all those things in mind. So grade has to be found. FCK, characteristic strength in place, has to be found. Then it is to be compared with the one which is specified. And this particular figure will help you directly in getting the value of FCK. Now this equation, if I divide it with the average value, FM, so FCK by FM, this becomes 1 minus KS by FM. So S by FM will be coefficient of variation. FCK by FM will be the ratio of characteristic strength by mean value. So I can then plot these two values in the form of this for both normal and non-normal cases. So for different coefficient of variations also, and different number of tests which are considerably less than the desired number, which is 50. If it's less than that, suppose if I have got 10 number of tests, and if I choose a certain value of coefficient of variation, like 15%, and it is normal distribution, I can choose this accordingly, come over here, and then I can find out the corresponding ratio of characteristic strength by the mean value. And mean I know, mean value of the in place cube strength I know. So then there I can find out the characteristic strength for my case. So that will tell you. Now, of course, then you have to apply your judgment whether it is acceptable or not. Towards that end only, I just mentioned a couple of minutes back that generally, if this is more than 75%, usual value I'm saying is more than 75% of specified value, you should assume it to be all right. That is not failing. Now, this very quickly. Do we have time, or should I stop now, Mr. Varghese?
Sir, please continue.
Okay. So I'll take 5-10 minutes more. Now, as I said, the calibration is very, very important. Now, largely the contents of the today's discussion I have largely completed, but I'll be just talking by taking some examples. I'll just show you some of the things which I just have spoken today or highlighted today. I said that developing a proper calibration between a NDT test observation and concrete strength is very, very important. If you have chosen to go ahead and carry out calibrated assessment, and for example, if we have to find out concrete strength and FCK value. So, and if you are using rebound hammer, as is, I had said now 2-3 times that it is very, very difficult from rebound hammer. If you have to find out the concrete strength, it is very difficult. But people say it is very easy. What they do is that they just go to the site, they take the rebound number, and by reading the standard chart, they will tell you this is the strength. And then say it, if it is more than the grade FCK, then they'll say this entire thing is not correct. Based on today's discussion, you must have, just understood and would be appreciating now that this is not correct. If that is to be done, then any schoolboy will do it. Why engineers are required to do that? So our job is to apply all these correction factors. And in the rebound hammer, the correction factors are huge. You can see there are factors connected with the material properties. There are, because the chart, I'm saying all these corrections are to be applied when you are using standard chart. If you are using a site specific chart, then of course the number of corrections to be applied, they get reduced. Only couple of them are to, not couple, I mean few of them are to be applied. You will be better placed if you are using site specific chart, but still some corrections are to be applied. Only when you use site specific chart and you apply some corrections, then only you can say that your reliability of estimating the concrete strength is good. Otherwise it is not. Otherwise, as I said, if you are just reading standard chart and finding out concrete strength, it is not correct. If you have to do that, then apply these corrections, because that chart is for different concrete. You have different concrete. Understand your concrete and understand their concrete based on which standard chart was prepared, and then apply these corrections. Aggregate has a huge influence to play. Cement content, cement type, angle of inclination, of course, that we always apply. Member characteristics, mass, compaction, surface type, age, rate of hardening, curing type. Surface type means if it is, for example, I'll give you example that if I use cardboard as a shuttering, apply as a shuttering. And second case, if you have used a steel shuttering, both are different, because standard specimen on which the standard chart was prepared, steel shuttering was used. If you are using steel shuttering, it's okay. If you are using cardboard shuttering, then what will happen is that field rebound numbers will be more, because cardboard shuttering, plywood shuttering will lead to water absorption and it will make the surface hard. You will get higher rebound numbers, which are misleading. So you have to apply a correction. That is one example. Similarly, all these factors will make some kind of influence on the rebound number. So all those are to be taken into account, and then only you have to develop a proper calibration chart. And then using time chart, then you will be able to get a in-place concrete cube strength at one location. Then you have to apply the statistical principles which I just mentioned in the previous interpretation of result slides. They are to be applied, and then FCK will be found, and then acceptance criteria has to be followed. This is quickly just to show you the influence of aggregate type on the calibration chart. This is a calibration chart between cube strength and rebound number. You can see if you're using hard aggregate and in the calibration the soft aggregate was used, you can see both the values should be different. Same rebound number 30 will give you different values, different strength values. Same is for wet and dry surfaces also. So you have to apply correction for the moisture also, as I said. Of course, this will be required even in the case when you are using site specific chart also, but this one is not. Similarly, this is just to show you the importance of so many correction factors which are to be applied. This last slide, of course, I think, yes, this is the last slide just to show you a particular case scenario. You have suppose 28 days cubes and they have failed, which generally, not generally, many times happens in certain situations. So cubes corresponding to certain concrete pores have failed. Now you have been asked to carry out investigations. So your aim here is confirmation of specification compliance. That is the aim. Because concrete which are assumed to represent certain concrete in the real structure, those cubes have failed. Now you have to carry out certain investigations on that concrete in the structure just to check its compliance. That is the aim. And second aim is also determination of structural adequacy if non-compliance is found. If suppose you actually after doing NDT you will really find that it is not complying, you will not straightaway say that demolish it. By using that reduced grade, lower strength, which you actually are finding now, you will find out the structural capacity. You can then carry out structural analysis. If that is coming out to be okay, then you can go ahead with that. The problem is only to that extent in certain portion. If after finding out structural adequacy, if you see that things are still bad, then you have to take a decision about repair, restoration, or demolition, whatever, depending upon the case. This is about the aim. Test planning. Now, in this case, what test you can plan? Rebound hammer or UPR both? As I said, generally both of them are done together. Combined testing is always preferred, because combined testing will give you the confidence level will be higher. You will get more accurate values. The reason is that there are certain influences which influence different methods differently. And when you perform those methods in a combined way, like 2 or 3 methods, these influencing parameters, they try to cancel each other. For example, if I take the case of moisture content in the rebound hammer, you will get a lower value. UPV will get a higher value. So if you perform both the tests together and then you use calibration and then you find out you make your assessment based on both these, then the influence will be cancelled out. So you will get a better result. That is the reason. So rebound hammer and UPV both are, for example, performed over here. And then testing of suspect concrete elements. You will perform this test on the suspect concrete. You will also perform this test on the concrete whose cubes were found to be all right, means good concrete. So you will perform this test on both the concretes. In situ strength prediction of concrete using, now this is about the variability first. Second, you will go ahead and also find out based on this rebound hammer and UPV using site-made charts. After applying correction factors, you will actually find out the grade FCK value also. That will also be found in order to check the compliance. Now, interpretation will be, you will find out using this first. You have rebound RH UPV values for good concrete, for suspect concrete portion and for the acceptable portion, for both. You will find out you will draw the histogram for the combined values. If you get a one peak, it means everything is fine. Things are fine as far as variability is concerned. You're getting one peak, and if coefficient of variation is also coming out to be all right, within the range, it's all right. Even if you're getting 2 different peaks, one for the suspect case, another for the other case, but both the COVs appear to be all right, then also you can say that 2 different qualities have been used, but then the mean value, standard deviation and coefficient of variation, they seem to be all right. If not, then of course that will come into suspicion. But in the second case, you have found the strength of the concrete, FCK also. Compare the FCK with the FCK specified following the acceptance criteria explained to you in the 2-3 slides back. And if it is accepting that criteria, you can say that everything is fine. If not, you will say that this concrete is suspect. There is a problem, and then you will recommend further testing. Further testing means you can recommend the cores can be extracted from the suspect area. Then your question would be, if cores are also saying that it is not good, the next will be, as I said, structural adequacy will be found. And if structural adequacy is also coming out to be insufficient, then retrofitting is the only solution, and sometimes demolition is also required. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
That's it from my side.
Chat box is open. You can post your question in the chat box.
Okay, let me.
Sir, one question from Shruti. Why do we conduct testing of concrete for 28 days only?
Why do we do test for 28 days only? I mean, which test she's saying?
Concrete testing,
Is
she's
it
asking.
standard cube test which we
Yeah,
perform?
standard cube test maybe.
Generally, it is seen that the concrete achieves its strength in 1 month. So 1 month means 28, 29 days. So that is why this particular figure of 28 days has come out. With the kinds of cements we are getting right now, we get most of the strength even in the initial 7-10 days now. So even 28 days could be slightly higher, especially with respect to today's cements, right? So that is the reason 28 days figure has come up. Is it okay?
Mr. Saurav is asking, can we do NDT on underwater structure?
Yes. We can do NDT on underwater structures also. There are special NDT equipments with some special protection techniques. But of course, then doing it is a challenging job. You need divers, you need special people who will go inside below the water, and then they will perform the test. So it is difficult, but certainly possible.
Mr. Swapnil Narkhedi is asking, do you recommend any specific test for post-retrofitting, after post-retrofitting?
Yes, for after the repairs are done, you are required. I mean, one should always be should be finding out the adequacy of the repairs as well, because it is not that somebody has done repair, it will also be all right. So for that, the most commonly used test is to check the effectiveness of repair is pull-off test. Pull-off test is performed to find out the adhesion strength, bond strength between the repair material and the parent concrete. That is the key to the success of the repair. So that pull-off test is performed to check the bond strength, and the values are given, bond strength, how much bond strength should be there for a particular case, and then we have to then compare. If you are doing grouting, you can perform UPV test on ungrouted thing and with the grout after grouting. Then you can check the improvement in the UPV value, and then that will let you know whether the grouting was successful or not. Of course, you can do coring also. Cores can also be extracted from before grouting, before repairing and after repairing. So these are some of the tests which can be performed.
Swati Ghadge is asking, suggest best non-destructive test for corrosion.
There is no single best test. You have to carry out, there is a set of tests. Because when you carry out, now corrosion is, one is on the, as a part of compliance testing, which I mentioned, or you can call it as a performance verification test. There you can, in situ test could be, you can carry out permeability test, you can carry out resistivity test. You can carry out RCPT test, which is rapid chloride permeability test. These tests can be performed on in situ concrete as a part of compliance testing. But if it is an old structure where corrosion's total evaluation is required, both in terms of cause and extent, there you have to perform number of tests, which I had in fact mentioned in the table which I had shown. You have to carry out cover thickness assessment. You have to find out carbonation depth. You have to find out chloride profiling has to be done. You have to find out carry out half cell resistivity. You have to carry out LPR test. Only then you will be able to answer the question of cause and extent. When this is answered, then you have to design repair appropriately.
Mr. YSN Kishore is asking, do you think SHM should be made mandatory for infrastructure projects in India, especially bridges?
Why not? Yes, if the cost permits and policy permits, should be. I think ideally it should be. Why not? This will definitely be adding value to the structure.
Mr. Nandakumar Kulkarni is asking, what is the deviation in result of direct and indirect method of USPV?
Indirect measurements are highly unreliable. Indirect measurements, I always recommend not to be performed. They should be performed only in rare cases where direct paths are not possible, or even other types of tests are also not possible. You only have UPV in your hand, and then you have to perform that only. Then only indirect tests should be performed, because indirect test, the signal strength is 3 to 5% of what you get in the case of direct measurements. So indirect measurements should not be performed. It will give you a huge amount of variation, uncertainty. It will not be giving you the idea about the concrete inside the member. So this should be completely rejected. So I will not recommend indirect measurements to be performed.
Mr. G. Madhava is asking, what
So
is the
one
percentage
question
variation
from
of strength between non-destructive testing and direct testing?
Sorry, what is the
What
meaning
is
of
the
that?
percentage of variation of
Hmm.
strength between non-destructive testing and direct testing?
What do you mean? Direct means core testing, core testing.
No, what he is written, what is the percentage variation of
Direct,
strength?
direct test means is the question related to direct cube strength, cube
He
test
is asking
which we
what will
carry
be the
out in the
deviation.
laboratory.
Nothing is written.
Deviation would be in the range of 15 to 25% variation.
एक क्वेश्चन है इधर.
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Ringsha sir is asking, sir, today there are many metro projects going on all over country. Normally these
Yes.
projects have design life of 120 years. Could you suggest test or technology on already cast structures to know balance useful life? Also,
Yes.
could you kindly suggest test on already cast concrete to know internal segregation and internal air entrance?
That's right. For existing structures, there is a term called residual life assessment. RLA is a very familiar term nowadays. So there are methodologies, there are procedures following which the residual life of an existing structure can be found. So you have to carry out a certain set of tests on existing structure depending upon exposure condition, depending upon the deterioration mechanism, deterioration which has happened till date. Based on that, service life models are to be used. Then residual life assessment can definitely be done. It is possible, right? First question. Second question, I think he had asked for how do we assess internal problems in the concrete like cavities or honeycombs or something, right? For that is the category which I just mentioned in one of my slides was localized integrity issue. So in order to do, there are a number of tests. Infrared thermography is one, tomography is another one, impact echo or impulse response are the tests depending upon the thickness or the extent of the member. These tests can be performed. There are radars also. There are many techniques now available using which we can find out, we can locate the integrity issue like cavity or crack or honeycombs inside the member. That can be found and then it can be located. Definitely possible.
One Mr. Nandakumar asks, how newly casted wrecker piles is to be tested in the creek for its durability?
First, durability.
Yeah.
Uh, for piles, if depending on whether how is accessibility possible for existing piles, pile integrity test of course is there that can be done, which will let you know the overall integrity of the pile, which will give you overall idea. And then if you see that there is a problem of integrity, it could be because of some construction issue, it could be because of some deterioration which has happened in the during the service life. But then what exactly has happened, that will not come from pile integrity test. So unless accessibility is possible, so what you can do is, depending upon where that pile is located, what are the exposure conditions, what kind of concreting was done, some retrospective testing can be done, and then approximate idea can be made that what would have gone wrong, what kind of deterioration would have happened. So some tests can be performed, but since it is not fully accessible, other than integrity test, corrosion test or other tests cannot be performed on pile.
So one Mr. Partharanjan asks, how an increase in sand cement ratio from 0.8 to 1 in a cement mortar mixture could result in lower density and compression and flexural strength?
So this is something related to concrete technology that was not part of today's lecture. So you can ask the respected participant to contact me directly separately. We can discuss that separately. Yes.
Are there any tests to know the stresses present in concrete structures?
Stress present. Yes, yes, that is part of SHM, structural health monitoring. There are sensors. You can put your strain gauges. You can put other kinds of smart sensors which are now being used. You can use them as an active mode or as a passive mode, depending upon what kind of testing it is, and you can find out definitely what is the stress at a particular location. It is definitely possible.
So, what are the tests to be conducted in glass fiber for
For
concrete? Yeah, for concrete.
I think this is also something which is not related to today's talk. You can ask the applicant, I mean, sorry, the participant to contact me separately. I'll answer that also. There are tests. There are tests, and there is a special ACI committee on FRP where glass fibers are covered. That what type of characterization test can be performed. It can be performed. ACI 440. ACI 440 has given recommendations for that.
One Mr. Angita asks, are there any standards to refer on how to find the corrections to be applied in rebound hammer test to get reliable results?
Yes. Yes, there are ACI 228 guideline is there. There is a European code, there is a British code also. RILEM committee report, FIB. There are a number of, but the one which she can I mean use is the ACI 2282R. It gives the recommendations, and then further there are cross-referencing. There are certain ASTM codes for performing rebound hammer test. ASTM code is there, and then correction factors are given. So ACI 228 along with corresponding ASTM code, they can be used to perform test and also to interpret the results, and then corrections, what kind of corrections to be applied there. Okay.
One Mr. Sharad asks, sir, what will be the impact of age, weather, moisture in rebound test?
Age, yes. Age has also got, because a rebound hammer test ideally should not be performed on old structures. The reason is if the aim is strength assessment. Yes, if your aim is only to see whether delamination has happened or not, then you can perform rebound hammer test even on the old concrete also. But if your assessment is to check the quality and strength of the concrete, then it should not be performed on old structures, because age is one issue. Another is carbonation, because carbonation happens and carbonation makes the concrete surface hard, and you will get higher rebound number value, which will lead to more strength values, which will be misleading. So on old structure, you should not be performing it. Yes, for moisture, there is a correction factor. The code which I just mentioned, for moisture, there is a correction factor. Moist concrete, generally the rebound value can be 8 to 10% lower than the actual value.
So one more question is there. So can we be able to investigate the voids below the footing after settlement with the ground
Yes.
penetrating radar test?
Yes, we can use GPR to locate the imperfections. We can use GPR, we can use impact echo, we can use tomography, we can use any of these tests, but then interpretation is important, has to be done very, very properly. It is definitely possible. There are tests. Yes.
One more question, sir.
Hmm.
Since nowadays, since we are using SEM in higher percentage at a times 56 strength, should be considered while results interpretation and taking any decision related to demolition or
Although this is
re-strengthening.
also something which is not related to today's talk, but yes, what the participant is saying is right. We should not be talking about 28 day strength, because when we are using these pozzolanic admixtures, then long-term strength is important, and then nobody is going to use structure before that. So yes, the suggestion is well taken. I agree.
The real of test was withdrawn by ASTM. Do you still
Sorry?
recommend it?
Which test? Which test?
Yeah, BREL. Yes, Dr. VVL Kantarao has written down.
BREAL. I'm not able to.
Yeah, BREL of test was withdrawn by ASTM. Do you still recommend it? What is the code for this test?
I'm
BREL.
not able to understand what is the question, so you can ask the participant to write to me directly. So you can even share my email.
Yeah, certainly.
My email address can be shared to all the participants, and I
Fine.
am always available. I will be happy to answer.
Yeah. There are still questions are available, sir. This questions will be taken into consideration through the chat.
Yes.
And perhaps it will be sent to you.
What I'll strongly recommend is that please pass on these questions to me by email, and also please send me the email address of the participant who has asked that particular question.
Right, sir.
And I will try my level best to answer all of them.
Yeah, it will be through email IDs only.
Yes,
The chats are there.
I'll definitely do that.
Yeah, certainly, sir. Certainly. So very thankful to you, sir. Very simplicity in deliverance. Everybody must have enjoyed and understood the gravity of the simplicity in the subject. Now, I request our professor, Dr. Neena Damge, to present formal vote of thanks for this today's e-talk.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, very well.
Good evening to one and all. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for the today's e-expert talk, which is the 15th in the series. On behalf of Civil Engineering Department and the KDK College of Engineering, Nagpur, I extend my most sincere thanks to our expert speaker, Dr. Umesh Kumar Sharma, for being with us this evening. It's been a great experience to listen to you, sir. Will surely help the participants in dealing with the in situ testing of the concrete structure. We all have gained and learned a lot, sir, of this presentation. I would like to thank our principal, Dr. D.P. Singh, Vice Principal, Dr. A.M. Badar, sir, for the support and encouragement in organizing such events. With a deep sense of gratitude, I would like to thank our head of the department, Dr. V. Varghese, for his initiative and efforts and leadership in taking up such a series of e-expert talks. Thank you, sir. A special mention and thanks to Professor Swapnil Satone for his sincere efforts and coordination. I would also like to thank all the teachers for their cooperation in organizing this expert talk. My sincere gratitude goes to our coordinators for their support and collaborations. I would like to thank Engineer Ravindra Ringsia, the President of ASC Western Region, Engineer Arun Uttarwar, the Chairman ICI Nagpur Chapter, Engineer Muin Khan, Regional Customer Service Head of Western Region of ACC Cement. Thank you, sir. With these associations, we are presenting our next e-expert talk, 16th in the series, on Vastu Shastra in Modern Civil Engineering by Dr. Bhupesh Gadge on 10th of June 2020. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants, professionals, government officials, faculties, and dear students for attending this lecture. So as you know, today we have got a very overwhelming response from the civil engineering fraternity. They were very high number of participants from Nagpur, Maharashtra, the different states of India as well as abroad. So we thank you all the participants once again. We value you and keep participating. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So all, one kind attention for kindly fill up the feedback form which will be sent on to your registered email ID for getting your e-certificate, sir. Thank you very much
So
once
can I,
again to all.
can I
Thanks a
leave
lot.
now?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank
very
you. Thank you very much, sir.